Meanwhile, the rent relief program, which had helped small and medium-sized businesses, is expiring today, with rent due, of course, tomorrow, and no news on a replacement for that. It is something that many businesses say is urgently needed, despite the fact that they consider the program itself somewhat flawed. Perrin Beatty is the CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Perrin, thank you for being with us. And this, I suppose sometimes a bad deal is better than no deal at all. In this case, what are we hearing, if anything? What are you hearing about the relief that could come, or is it just it's over and rent is now on the shoulders of business?
We just simply don't know at this point. The only thing that we know for sure is the government, when they announced the extension of the program for September, said on September 8th that it would end as of today. They had talked about having some sort of program in place afterward, but we have no idea what it is, and the rent checks are due tomorrow. So for literally thousands of businesses across the country, their situation is desperate.
And so what do you think will be the outcome of that? I mean, when you talk about to some of your members who have been relying on it, what will they do without it?
They're completely at a loss, so many of them. You take a look at it, it looks as if economically and socially we're heading into a very bleak period as we move into the fall. The piece that you had on just before this indicated that. And that means that things are going to get worse before they get better. You look at restaurants, for example. They had a bit of a lifeline. Patios could be open during the summer. That's not going to work as we get into fall. And after staff costs and the like, their largest fixed cost is for rent. They need to know where they stand, and they need to know it now, and they need to know that the government will be there to assist them to get to the other side of the river.
One of the complaints about this program all along, Perrin, was that it was in the hands of the landlord, perhaps by necessity, but just in terms of how it unfolded and how many people were able to use it, would you say it has been a success?
No, the program has been flawed from the outset, but as you pointed out, something is better than nothing. The parliamentary budget officer, when he did his report at the end of August, pointed out that the take-up of the program was only about a third what the government had budgeted for. So it's a sign that the program wasn't working well. The threshold figure was too high, that you had to have had a drop of 70%, and the means of delivery was bad. And the landlords are painted as the bad guys here. No landlord wants to put all of his tenants out of business. One of the challenges here was a very complex program that required the landlord to attest that each one of his tenants met the criteria, and the government could go back after the fact, audit it, and the landlord would be on the hook if for some reason the criteria weren't met. So it makes much more sense to look at how do we get the money into the hands of the people who are actually having to pay the rent.
We also, in Ontario at least, a ban on commercial evictions is intended, but not yet in place. Do you think there will be those who get caught between these two things and, in fact, are evicted from their units before that protection is available to them?
It's a very real risk. And if you look at the pressures that small businesses have on them today, it's tremendous. They don't have large cash reserves. And as a result, then they're squeezed immediately. They're finding that they're uncertain in terms of what sort of public support is going to be there, what sort of government support is going to be there. And they're going into an economic and health period, which looks pretty bleak as we go into the fall. We've had government programs that have deferred taxes and deferred fees and the like. This is a deferral. It isn't a forgiveness of taxes that are owed. And what's happened is in the interim, small businesses have used the money that they've saved on the deferral to replace cash flow that they've lost. As this money comes due, right, people are going to be hitting the wall. And this is why it's critical for governments at all levels to be there to help businesses make it to the other side of the river so they can survive.
And of course, Perrin, the river may be widening here. This is right around the time when many businesses would have hoped that they could start to see a little bit more normal cash flow and revenue. Instead, we have many places contemplating shutdowns. How communicative are the various levels of government about how that will go? Are you in touch with them? Because I can imagine a blanket shutdown is not in the interest of the business community. Are they open to a more targeted approach?
They are. They signaled in the speech from the throne that as it related to the tourism, hospitality, restaurant sector and so on, that they were prepared for the first time to really do a more targeted approach. That's good news. Because what we've learned up until now is that programs that are one size fits all are often one size fits none. And we need to we need to make the transition away from a subsidies-based economy to one where businesses and where families can become self-reliant again. And that means targeting the assistance to people who need it and to businesses who need it, and to meet those specific needs, as opposed to sort of splashing money across the board indiscriminately without meeting the specific needs that people have.
And of course, there is a shift in attitude that comes with that. COVID-19 was so unique in the sense that, sorry to modify the word unique, but was unique in the sense that it came out of nowhere. It couldn't really be anticipated. There was nobody to blame. So we couldn't say to a business, you should have planned for this better. Therefore, that blanket support approach made perfect sense. We all understood it. It made everybody feel better. At what point, as a former member of government, I mean, the complexity here is big. At what point do you say, look, it's a shame that your business is going under. It's a shame that there will be layoffs, but it is now no longer government's job to save you. This is the hard knocks of the economy and the world, and this is how it's going to be.
If we were under ordinary circumstances here, we wouldn't be calling for assistance. We're calling for assistance in this instance because these are businesses that are sustainable, and that if it hadn't been for the pandemic, wouldn't be in this sort of a circumstance. And what's critical for us is to be able to transition away from subsidies to people and businesses becoming self-sustaining again. The government was absolutely right. The single best thing they can do for the economy is to manage the pandemic well, which means we need a national COVID strategy that is coherent, well understood, where everybody is pulling on the oars in the same direction, and where we can move away from lockdown to reopening the economy and letting businesses and people get on with their lives more. And we can do it if we work together and if we have a clear strategy. What we've been doing over the last 6 or 7 months, for the reason that you mentioned, that this came out of the blue, is we've been reacting to the disease as opposed to managing it. We can't continue to do that for the next year. Until we have a widely distributed vaccine, we're going to have to live with this silent killer in our midst. And we're going to have to be honest with people about that. We're going to have to focus on how we reduce the risk. We can do it because we know so much more now than we did in March or April. But we need a strategy to be able to do it. And all of us have to work together. If we do that, we can begin to reopen our economy, let people get on with their lives, move away from subsidies, and get people back to work, the million Canadians who are jobless today.
With all of that, though, of course, comes the price tag. Where is your level of concern these days for the spending and the willingness to keep spending that we're seeing here without any kind of fiscal anchors in sight?
It's high. Just as we need to have a national COVID strategy, we need a mini budget. We need it in October. And it needs to set out what the government's plan is. Fiscal anchor, what its assumptions are for the course of the pandemic and for growth over the course of the year, and how they hope to get the public finances under control. Governments say, well, we can't do that. We can't provide a budget to you because there's so much uncertainty. But every business in Canada has to operate on a budget. And they know that as they draw up their budgets for next year, they may have to revise those budgets over the course of the year. They would understand if the government had to do so too. But it's important for government to level with Canadians about what assumptions they're making, what they know, what they don't know, and what commitment they're prepared to make to restore the fiscal health of the country.
Perrin Beatty, great to have you with us. Appreciate it. Perrin Beatty is the CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce.